Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. You gotta have something if you wanna be with me. Ba ba ba. God, that's a good song. What is up, my team? We are back with another reaction video. We're going to be talking or reacting to a debate between Andrew Wilson and Tim Pool on the nature of God, and more specifically, God's relationship to logic. I imagine I'm going to be reacting to Andrew frequently because he's a very popular rationalist, and we're trying to kill rationalism on this channel. So I say, without further ado, they kind of had a discussion on rights and duties. It was kind of interesting, but let's get right into the meat of the bones, huh?
Earth, right? You don't really have a right to do this, and also God's nature can't be contrary.
You think babies don't have a right to life?
Well, hang on. I'll explain.
That's very important. God's nature can't be contrary.
God's nature can't be contrary. You agree with that, right?
No.
We'll elaborate what you mean by that.
So God
Can't contradict himself?
Yeah, he can't make a God more powerful than him.
I disagree with that.
What?
So
why do you think he couldn't? Why? Because it messes up with causality? Well, causality belongs to the mental structure, and the mental structure, which is to say rationality, is ultimately a necessary projection made by the ego intended to illuminate the natural order of the world and allow us to participate in that order, allowing us to attain truths that transcend the ego. It is a projection at the end of the day. So the point is, if you employ logic and rather than illumination, you get obscurity. You're using bad logic. Logic cannot encompass everything. So causality belongs to logic, and if logic cannot encompass everything, it certainly can't encompass God. We all know that. This is anti-rationalism 101. God is invisible, quantifiably immeasurable, and consciously unknown for the most part. He is essentially a giant, I don't even like using the terms he, it is essentially a giant mystery. And what rationalists like Andrew have done is they've taken the whole and divided the very crust, the quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and projected all this human, anthro, whatever, onto him. So now God becomes a man with a white beard and all this stuff. Okay, that's the rational projection of God.
well, you're talking about, good God created a stone so heavy he himself couldn't lift it. God can do anything.
Yes.
That's incoherent.
According to what view? Rationality. Why in the world are you employing rationality, like I just said, that relies on the quantifiably measurable and consciously known when it comes to God?
Not
logic only exists within the confines of God's word. God's word is beyond your comprehension.
No, logic is a transcendental category, and since it's a transcendental category, we know it exists even though it's not physical. So but all things bind by it. Part of God's nature has
is Jesus God?
Yes.
Would Jesus be able to lift a 5-ton boulder?
Yeah.
Then
there's no contradiction there.
So certainly Jesus did perform miracles.
But there's no contradictions with those. So those follow the lines of logic. God's nature still has to be logical because it's part of his nature. His ontology is logic.
Now we got a problem. So it is true, if God is all-encompassing and God is essentially everything, or the cause of everything, it is true that we obviously see the natural layer or of significance on the world. We see science, we see logic, we see basic discursive thought. That's true. Remember that point Andrew made at the beginning about God's nature not being contrary. So Andrew, seemingly what he's saying is, because it can be proven, and I think he's right, that logic is a present and efficacious aspect of reality of the world and the human condition, therefore if logic is a part of this nature, and God is nature, or the entirety of nature, well then God's ontology must be logical. The problem with this is obvious. Not only is there a rational layer of significance in this world, but there's obviously also a pre-rational and an irrational layer of significance as well. And I know for a fact Andrew would concede this point because he would be forced to. For him to not concede this point, he would have to take out all the bullets in the gun that he shoots the left with. Because what are his criticisms of the left? A lot of them I share, that they're deficiently irrational and pre-rational. Okay, well if irrationality is a part of the nature, and if being a part of nature necessarily means you are part of God, then that means God is both rational and irrational simultaneously, but this is not possible. Because like the true rationalist he is, he said that God's nature cannot be contrary. So of course, rationalist is going to he's going to posit God against God, or posit the irrational against the rational in an antithetical sense, invoke the third aspect of measuring thought to privilege one or form a synthesis. And of course, in this sense, as a rationalist, he's always going to privilege rationality. So no, God's nature is not logical or not rational. At best, it's partly logical and partly irrational and partly all these other things. It's really irrational, which means without rationality, which essentially means that without rationality, the rational part being taken for the whole, without exclusive rationality. So, no, God's nature is not exclusively logical. It is irrational.
So, my
Can
point
God,
is,
you're saying God can make a burrito that's so big you can't eat it?
Probably.
of course.
What? That's incoherent. That's like
Yeah, it's incoherent to rationality. Again, like if we were doing like scientific experiments, I would be a little more forgiving on this. But I just couldn't imagine being this confident employing a flashlight in an area where it doesn't belong, and then being shocked that it doesn't show anything.
It's literally not.
it is. It's totally. That's literally the definition of incoherence. Totally incoherent.
Literally not. I'm going to explain.
How is it not? Okay, go ahead.
So I can use an example like programming, for instance.
Okay.
I can program a video game in which I have absolute authority over the whole thing. I can change the rules at any moment. Within the confines of this game, I can create a rock that my avatar cannot move.
Sure.
I can program it so that my mouse can't move it
granted.
until I go into the BIOS.
And you
change
both program the video game and not program the video game?
Yes. What do you mean?
What? How do you, so you can make a video game that you never made.
What are you trying to say?
Can you make a video game that you never made?
I think what's happening here. I think Andrew is trying to say, if Justin, let's say you're 35 and you've made 2 games. I think what Andrew is saying is it possible that you didn't make these 2 games? Is it possible that if I claim that you made these 2 games, is it false? No, obviously. Rationally, that would be no. And I think what Tim is hearing, and I think it's the way Andrew phrased it, in fairness to him, I mean, we all make mistakes. It's really not that big of a deal. But I think what Tim is saying is, I've already made 2 games. Are you asking me if it's possible if I can make a 3rd game? Like, yeah, obviously. So I think there's a miscommunication here.
Yes.
What?
What do you mean? I've made.
That's direct
I literally can
contradiction.
only make games I've never made.
Yeah.
I don't make the same game twice.
No.
See, I think that's what he's saying. He's saying, are you asking me if I'm making the same game twice? And Andrew's saying, no, I'm asking you if you originally made that original game. I think that's what they're getting at.
And you
Rest
both
of the
make a
sequel.
game while at the same time you're not making the game.
But I don't
Can
understand.
the game exist and at the same time not exist?
Yes, it can. A game can absolutely exist and cannot exist. Welcome to 2026. Welcome to the internet. Welcome to irrationality. So, of course, when we're talking about something being in a state of existence and non-existence simultaneously, we're obviously referencing or gesturing at quantum mechanics, which in turn leads us to quantum logic. So we're going to start with the general, and then we're going to apply this to the particular, because I think video games is actually a really good example. So, of course, with quantum logic, this idea that elemental particles, the smallest of particles, they're not actually particles. They only become particles when you measure them. Really, when they're no longer measured, they retract from being a singular, individual particle onto itself, and it functions like a wave, which is to say it's spread out rather than collapsed into a point. Okay, so the linear clock in the linear world we live in, what really is going on underneath the hood is constituted by a bunch of rapid elementary particles that go do-do-do-do-do. It's like a bunch of little milliseconds, probably going way faster than that constitute a normal second. Okay, well, let's see if we can apply this to logic, right? Let's take my computer here. Well, is my computer a computer? How do we know that my computer is this and not something else? Well, in theory, the computer could be other things. It could be an extension of the floor. It could be an extension of the wall. It could be an extension of the table that it's resting upon. It could be a symbol for modernity. It could be a symbol for the death of religion or the death of spirituality. It could be an imagistic a futuristic image insofar as a reminder of the future, so it almost becomes a temporal object as well. So what happened was, when I turn and I see the computer and I perceive it as a computer, in the same way that the elementary particles rapidly fire off to form the traditional stable linear world, same thing with quantum logic. So my brain and my consciousness said, well, is it a computer or is it an extension of the table? It's a computer. Is it a computer or is it an extension of the wall? It's a computer. Is it a computer or is it a symbol? It's a computer. Until eventually I got the computer. So yes, when I consciously measured it, the wave function, the fact that it was the ontology of the object was spread out, collapses into a singular object. But to now recognize this wave function, we can say that the computer belongs to a field of ontological simultaneity. So it is both the computer, the symbol that I talked about, the extension of the floor, the extension of the table, everything you could think of while also being none of them simultaneously. So this is arational, this is acausal, this is aperspectival. So that's quantum mechanics, now the quantum logic. Now let's apply this to video games specifically. So video games are real, right? Sometimes it can be difficult, especially with digital games, either on the internet or on PlayStation or some sort of console. It can actually be pretty difficult to pinpoint spatially its location in space, because really it belongs to this amaterial field that the internet makes present. So of course, when I'm playing FIFA, for example, the game is real. How do I know? Because I can empirically verify it. I can experience it directly. I don't have to think and get lost in the clouds. It's real. I can feel it right there. So what's happened is, as I'm playing, the video game no longer becomes a matter of is it real or unreal simultaneously. It becomes real. So what happens when you turn off the console and go to bed, right? If I am walking down like I did the other day and I stub my toe on my PlayStation, which, by the way, I only play FIFA. This is a terrible life to live. FIFA is the worst shit imaginable. I hope everyone at EA just... If it were up to me, you would be getting some divine punishment, my friend. Oh my God. Don't get me started. Anyways, I recognize I stubbed my toe on the console. I didn't stub my toe on the game itself. The game belongs to this amaterial realm that is like out there in the world, but it's not out there in the sense like it's my computer mouse or my phone. It's something that's quantifiably measurable and consciously known, essentially. So when the game isn't, but having said that, this amaterial aspect of the game relies obviously on the material object that is the console. So when the console is not being played, when the game is not being played, the game both exists and doesn't exist simultaneously. It exists because it's fully rendered, it's fully coded, it's got all the software backup, and that's somewhere in the humming of the console, right? So it is real insofar as its potential is real, but it's also not real insofar as we haven't actually experienced the game. We haven't empirically verified the game's existence. Instead, it belongs to this amaterial field of potentiality, which is real, but it's also unreal at the same time. So a digital game nowadays that is unplayed exists in the same state that Schrodinger's cat stayed in, where it was both dead and alive simultaneously, and it only collapsed into one or the other at the point of conscious measurement. Same thing with video games. When it's not being played, it both exists in the real world as potentiality, in this sort of, it's very immaterial, but also doesn't exist insofar as there's no actual empirical verification of the game. When I play FIFA, the balls aren't being kicked into the goal. I don't play World of Warcraft. When I'm playing World of Warcraft, no Warcraft is killing the world. The game actually isn't being played, and yet it's still real. So same thing, in the same way that Schrodinger's cat collapses into one or the other at the point of conscious measurement, same thing with the game. The game collapses into one or the other, that is to say, is made real or perceived as real at the point of conscious measurement, which is to say, when I turn the game on, when I turn my computer on, when I turn the controller on. So yes, this is aperspectivity. Aperspectivity means that we are recognizing the co-presence and efficaciousness of multiple perspectives or viewpoints simultaneously. And that's what we're doing here. So Andrew needs to stop being the intellectual version of the fucking newspaper, and he needs to fast forward into the intellectual version of the internet. And the internet, of course, is that medium, that site or point of convergence or point of integration that makes the material and immaterial real. Pretty cool, huh?
There is a reality where, yes, quite literally, it's called the paradox. Paradoxes are things that exist within the confines of our logical reality.
That's a contradiction.
No! It's only a contradiction from your limited, rational, quantifiably measurable, consciously known from a singular perspective. That is where it's a contradiction, yes. And you are... Take video games. It's a perfect example. Again, the contradiction is resolved by saying the game is real when we know the game is real because I'm playing it. Right, but the game only becomes real because you're playing it. It's not a contradiction. Tim is 100% right on this. Contradictions become paradoxes when they're integrated. And what is a paradox at its core? What is the process of a paradox? In the same way that the process, the underlying process in Goethean morphology of rationality, is the triangular thought form, right? Well, the process for paradox is a representation of the covalidity of the rational and the irrational. Take this statement: you would not have found me if you had not sought me. That's not a paradox. That's a rational sentence. That's a rational positing, a rational statement. Great. So we have finding and seeking. We have finding on my left, seeking on my right. Okay? So what a paradox does is it switches from left to right and right to left. So instead of saying you would not have found me if you had not sought me, the paradox says you would have not sought me if you had not found me. So in here, both the irrational and the rational are co-present and efficacious. And the reason why this represents a transcendence, obviously, is that instead of just having the best of the rational world, rationalist, we have the best of all worlds. The irrational gets streamlined through rationality, and the rationality gets streamlined through irrationality, and that's important because the human condition is constituted of both, and the pre-rational and the irrational.
A paradox is different than a contradiction.
Yeah, it's better.
Tim,
I would love to hear what is a paradox, Andrew? I would love to hear it. I don't know. I would love to hear him try to explain the process rather than just looking up the definition and just giving me that. I mean, that's fine. I don't mind that, but
you cannot both be me and you. You can only be you.
You don't know that.
That's amazing to me that someone who takes the spiritual principle seriously would say that. Because if God is all, and the divisions between you and I are man and man, Tim and Andrew. Well, if God is that point of ultimate integration, and God is everything, he is the metaphysical fuel, or maybe the metaphysical ideal, or whatever you want to call it, the divine structuring agent that brings about all things. Okay, well, if that's the case, then yeah, rationally we're separate because we have the antithetical, which is true, obviously. I mean, I'm not Brad Pitt, much better looking, but spiritually, we all are one. In the sense, we all are the God being, or we all are God, because we are all unified in his spiritual divinity. So, yes, rationally, you are not me and I'm not you, but again, we brushed up against a limit of rationality. And I'd be a little more forgiving of this if I didn't know Andrew was a spiritual man. The whole point of spirituality is trying to integrate you spiritually, the individual, with not only your fellow man, but also the fellow world and the fellow cosmos, as well as the spiritual quote-unquote other side. So, I'm a little surprised he said this.
Well, yeah, I do, because it would violate the law of non-contradiction.
So this is where I feel like you're running into a problem.
Law of non-contradiction is good up to a point. I'm sorry for pausing so much, but we'll let it play after a while. A molecule is an individual entity unto itself. It is a whole. When you put a bunch of them together, it becomes the part of a cell. So a molecule is both a whole and a part simultaneously, and it only depends on when you're talking about things. When you have the cell, it's constituted of molecules that have been put into parts, right? But we do have an understanding of what that part is. So it's both part and whole simultaneously. This completely transcends the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, and the law of the excluded middle.
You think you know God?
Based.
No, I only understand that God has to have a nature, an ontological nature.
And and what you think you know of God
tells us his nature.
Looking through a keyhole through a 800 bedroom mansion.
This is based on what God tells us his nature is.
Yes, and God you can't comprehend higher dimensions.
Yeah, guys, God's nature is rational. That's why he transmitted his nature in the Bible, which is mythology and imagistic and symbolic. And you'll notice that the Bible is not a series of syllogisms and rational proofs like Wittgenstein's Tractaticus or whatever.
This is an energy. What you're talking about is what's called an essence energy distinction. I agree with you that I can only participate in the energy of God, but I cannot understand the essence of God. That I agree with.
I don't think you're a Christian.
Based. Okay. What?
There's a simple question.
This is Catholic dogma, Tim. I don't think you're a Christian because you're disagreeing with me on the nature of the.
Can God create a boulder so heavy that he himself cannot lift it?
No.
God exists outside of the confines of this logic in which you think you exist. God is so far beyond you, you cannot comprehend this. To ask if God can lift a rock is asking, like, it's a stupid question because we are one tetragillionth of the universe, and you are presupposing God lives in your rules.
Based. What logic is, what rationality is, what the mental structure is, what the mythical structure and the magical structure and the integral structure, what they are stages of heaven. They are all important. It is not that we should toss out logic wholesale. That's stupid. That's civilizational suicide, and a lot of anti-rationalists who do that, I cannot stress to you how much I disagree with you. But it is a stage of heaven. It is not heaven itself.
That is reductivist, earthly, one-dimensional thinking.
Yeah, so you're saying there's universes where there could be contradictions?
Absolutely. Today's universe is where. What do you think Einstein did when he integrated space and time into space-time? Logic says that's a contradiction. You can only have space or you can only have time, like the laws of logic we went through a minute ago. You can't even account for the contemporary world with logic, and you're telling me, and that's all measurable and known for the most part, and you're telling me you can account for God, who is quantifiably immeasurable and consciously 99.999% unknown? You can't even account for acausal manifestations in biology or physics. Hello?
Saying
could I interject here with a question on the nature of God for Tim? Tim, do you think that God could be, instead of a supreme good, supreme evil?
I don't know that there is such a distinction. God, as the creator of all things, is not going to be good nor evil. What? I'm not a Christian.
It might not be the worst take, because notice what he said here. God might not be good nor evil. And if good and evil are simultaneously present and efficacious, which they obviously are, it's like when people talk about American history. Is it good? Well, there's all this amazing stuff. We have all these amazing moral revolutions and moral gains, and we have freedom, and we have liberty, and we have a justice system, and we have all this stuff. Great. Or is it bad? Well, we had slavery, which so did every other civilization. We had Jim Crow. We had other things like redlining and all that stuff, and we just had general negative, evil attitudes. Both of these are sufficiently present, so it depends on how Tim wants to take this.
But I mean, it would So,
no. I'm not.
The thing is like what you're saying. What you just said is, I understand the nature of God.
No,
I understand that this being who lives in this different dimension that I could never fathom.
I'm saying God
could neither be evil nor good. That's you making a declaration that you understand the nature of God.
No, it's that
one. I'm going to be charitable to Andrew, and I think what he's trying to do is point out a hypocrisy, because if he's saying that's a bad thing, well, that's what you're doing, so I don't know what the problem is. Two, this is like you shooting at me and me shooting at you, and then you looking from the outside and saying this is the exact same thing. No, in reality, I'm the one who came up to you and put a gun to your family's head, which means I instigated, and then you shot me. That's me. That's not you. You did the good thing. You did the right thing. You killed a bad person. My point is that there's a distinction in quality. Tim's view is almost paradoxical in the sense that in not knowing God's nature, we know God's nature. It's paradoxical. Both are present and efficacious. Yeah, we don't know it because the know belongs to a particular epistemology, which is rationality, and is beyond rationality. So the only thing we know about its nature is that rationality can't really capture it, and that's about it. The idea that that's the qualitative equivalent of what Andrew's saying is, I know exactly what God's nature is because he explains it, and it all happens to be hyper-rational without anything else, any other aspect of the world or the human condition, despite the fact that it was transmitted through mythology. It's ridiculous.
I would not describe God as good or evil because God exists outside the confines of human comprehension.
Okay.
To assert
that contradiction.
I'm not trying to be mean here, but notice the rationalist indignance here. You've taken the whole, which includes the quantifiably immeasurable and consciously known, the quantifiably measurable and consciously known, the quantifiably immeasurable and consciously unknown, the quantifiably measurable and consciously unknown, and qualitative evaluations, and spirit, frankly. You take all that, you just pretend it doesn't exist, and then you only focus on the measurable and the known, and then you go, look, I've got it all figured out, and anyone outside of this is clearly crazy, and I'm going to get a little indignant over it. No, Tim should be getting indignant with you, my friend. You're the one who's giving me this rationalist nonsense.
Because contradiction exists only within our reality.
Oh, it only, yeah.
You cannot comprehend what exists outside of the
literally, the laws of logic do not actually exist physically in our reality. They're transcendental. They're transcendental categories. They govern our reality, but they don't exist.
Yeah, they're a projection.
Okay, what? Well, this is all.
You're saying
this is
God
all Christian
has to
dogma.
follow these rules. Period.
No, I'm saying that God has a nature like Tim has a nature. Like, for instance, okay, your nature as Tim, the things that make up you. You have a heart and you have lungs and you have things like this, and your heart and your lungs and things like this do work inside of your body that assist your body in moving and functioning and this and that. They're part of what you are. To take all of those things out would change who you are.
I agree, Andrew. So why don't you stop projecting at Tim and take the human being, which is multifariously constituted of the pre-rational, the irrational, the rational, and the irrational, and deal with the entirety of the nature of humans. So what you're doing is exactly what you're accusing Tim of doing. You're taking out all the organs, metaphorically, and just leaving only the rational ones, and now you're accusing others of doing it. I mean, come on now, this is almost a joke.
Okay? This is the same thing with God. We're just saying that there's a part of God's nature which he has shared with us as part of his nature, as the Logos. The Logos, part of it is logic.
Only part.
Yes.
Yeah, but
yes, and Andrew confirms this because think about what he's saying. He's saying God's ontology is the Logos, which is essentially just a synonym for logic or rationality. And even he cannot help himself but to say a part. So what other parts are there, Andrew? And if there are other parts, do you not acknowledge that this completely destroys your idea that God has to be non-contrary? If there are multiple parts here? Hello?
That would mean that part of God's nature is to not violate logic.
Did God create this universe, or is this universe just a function of God?
God created the universe.
So God could change the rules?
Yes.
Well, no, that would be illogical.
God could not change the rules of the universe.
Now it would go contrary to.
God is all powerful. He's omnipotent. He's all knowing, but he can't reconcile a contradiction.
So it's like what you're asking me is this: what would it be like if fire wasn't hot? Well, now we've changed the fundamental reality of what fire is.
So I'll simplify it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe our reality, first of all, what we think we know in science, there are higher dimensions we can't perceive. This implies, as most scientific discoveries in the last 130 years, if we choose to believe them, for instance, the electromagnetic spectrum, humans, or air is my favorite example. Humans did not know that air existed because they couldn't perceive it until there was this guy who was showering who realized that there is matter in and all around us. There have been numerous instances where humans realize that things we can't perceive exists. And that is indicative of humans don't know nearly enough about the universe, and that we do know. The discovery of the charged electromagnetic spectrum revolutionized human thought because we didn't realize that what we touch, smell, see, and hear as reality is less than a millionth or a billionth of what reality actually is.
Or a trillionth. Or a trillionth. Who knows? Yeah.
And not understanding dark matter, we are a speck in a massive universe on the ass of a mosquito relative to what God is or could be. Humans saying, I know the nature of God is arrogance that defies the idea of what we know we are limited in thinking. That is, the average person thinks infinity is a number.
Yeah, but that makes
Go to the average person.
That makes no sense because all the things that you're saying right now and attributes are trying to define the nature of God.
Yeah, it's paradoxical. Yes, this is a contradiction to you. Tim is being fine. It's paradoxical. We both know and not know the nature of God simultaneously. Our ignorance of it informs our knowledge, and our knowledge informs our ignorance. It's a paradox. Yes, it's a transcendence, as we covered earlier.
Even though you don't think you are. If you're saying, so for instance, if you say,
want to put God in a box, I'm saying God
it's the opposite. So if you say God is so complex you can't understand it, you have actually given me criteria for the nature of God. If you say God is timeless,
lack of knowledge.
Yeah, if you say God is timeless, you've given me criteria for the nature of God. If you say God exists in the 19th dimension, you have now expressed the nature of God. So what we're doing is the same exact thing. I'm expressing to you the biblical nature of God. What God expresses to us is part of his nature.
You're making an atheist argument to me.
It's not atheist.
So
it's the opposite. It's dogma.
Atheists are the ones who argue to me that the universe is mathematical, logical, cold, and it is what it is. It is functions as such.
No, they're physicalists.
And Einsteinian God, which is an atheist view, is the view that God is a God of science and that exists as some form of the universe.
Yeah, as far as I understand, Einstein took Spinoza's understanding of God, which I'm not an expert in by any means, but essentially identified God with nature. It almost makes you wonder if he had a numinous experience with just the world and nature more broadly.
And then my view of God is that God exists beyond and that our concepts of physics are just components of what God has created, and God is likely beyond our own perception.
But you've said a bunch of things here that have entailments. God creates. So we know that for sure, right?
And in science, nothing can be created.
If God creates and God was the first thing, then that means God was uncreated.
Yes.
Yeah, so if God was uncreated and God created, now we know something about the nature of God.
Yes, but the nature of God disproves what you're saying. Because if God causally creates everything, but God himself was not causally created, well, it sounds like we're in the paradoxical, irrational world where we have an uncaused causer. That's not rational. That's irrational. It's not irrational either. So yeah, I mean, your point stands, but it kind of, at least from my perspective, deconstructs what you're saying.
Certainly.
Yeah, so this is my whole point. And so we could say the same thing, right? Same thing here.
I think you're an atheist.
Okay, well, that makes no sense.
You're making the best case argument for atheism I've ever heard.
How?
He's not entirely wrong. When you use strict logic to argue the existence of God, you essentially are an atheist. It reminds me of the political debates back in the day. They use this term called morally lucky. And essentially what that means is your moral reasoning is the exact same as people who we would roundly consider evil. Nazis, hopefully communist, think like the Attila the Huns of the world, and just terrorists maybe, where they divide everything into the sort of us versus them. And the only reason you got on the other side of that is because you were lucky enough to be born in the place you were born at the time you were born. If you were born in this part of the world, you would be thinking exactly the same because your moral logic is exactly the same. And that's kind of, I think, applicable here, where Tim is like, look, dude, you're giving me a bunch of rationalist nonsense. The only reason you believe in God is because you got theologically lucky. I mean, the idea that it's just ridiculous.
Oh,
that God is what we experience in the universe is what we would describe as God. It is the definition of everything atheists have ever argued to me.
I'm not even making arguments to you right now. All I'm doing is expressing to you
God is not all powerful.
No, the opposite.
You said God can't create a boulder he cannot lift.
No, because
every single priest
do you know what,
and theologian I've talked to has said the opposite.
No, none of them. Their dogma literally would prevent them from defying the nature of God. Not a single theologian on planet Earth who's a priest has ever said to you, Tim, God could create a God more powerful than him. That never happened.
No, they said
it's not possible.
To claim to understand the power of God is arrogance to assert that you know what God
I'm not saying what the power of God is. I don't know exactly what the limits of all powerful are.
No, you're saying this reality is a part of God and is what it is, and it's uncontradictory and unchanging.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that the laws of logic, right? The law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle
Bullshit.
Are part of
we transcended every single one. Did I not mention those exact same laws of logic earlier?
Nature of God. We know this because this is how God created everything and how God expressed to us he creates.
It reminds me of the Nietzsche quote. Everything in the earth is so drenched in rationality that its irrational origins, really irrational origins, become implausible. No, it's not true. You've taken irrational, phenomenological, whatever, and you just wrapped it in rational clothing, and now you're pretending it's rationality.
So if that is the case, we can understand that that's part of God's nature. He will not defy his nature because it's his nature.
Yes, he will.
Will not defy.
The nature of God, as you described it, is the universe.
No, it's not the universe. The universe had a creator.
Yes, and
that creator had to be uncreated.
And the universe is a part of God.
No, that's a Gnostic belief.
That's what you just said.
No, I didn't say that at all. That
you said
it's a Gnostic belief to believe that everything is
of the
parts
universe,
of
the
God.
logic is a part of God.
No. Logic is part of God's nature. You're saying that because the universe is also governed by logical rules, that means that it's part of God. That doesn't even follow.
You said that.
No, the opposite. I'm saying the opposite of that.
So God is illogical.
Had to be uncreated.
And the universe is a part of God.
No, that's a Gnostic belief.
That's what you just said.
No, I didn't say that.
If you're saying if God created the universe, I mean, I don't think it's absurd to suggest that the universe could be a part of God. What did he create it out of, if not his own substance?
At all.
You said
it's a Gnostic belief to believe that everything is
of the
parts
universe,
of
the
God.
logic is a part of God.
No. Logic is part of God's nature. You're saying that because the universe is also governed by logical rules, that means that it's part of God. That doesn't even follow.
You said that.
No, the opposite. I'm saying the opposite of that.
So God is illogical.
No, that doesn't even make sense either. What you're saying, all these things you say, they don't follow from one another. So you have to back up to the beginning.
So you said the logos, God, the logic, God is non-contradictory.
Yeah.
What God cannot create a boulder that he himself cannot lift.
Yeah, illogical. No, because it's against his nature.
What does that mean?
It means that you can't do things which defy your nature because otherwise you wouldn't be you.
All right, I think we're just kind of spinning the wheels now. Obviously, this last point he makes, yeah, I agree, logic is a part of his nature, and I know you agree with that because you keep saying part of his nature, but you don't integrate the other parts of his nature. So you're on one hand, you're saying logic is a part of God's nature. Simultaneously, you're saying, well, it's essentially the whole because you can never break the rules of non-contradiction. So essentially, and if everything is constructed by this, then everything is like, which one is it? And it's not like he's integrating this from an A perspective view. Let's read some of these comments, huh? Oh, got no comments here? Oh. Let's see. What do we got here? All right. This is an example of never listening, only arguing. Andrew's ability to not get pissed when talking with complete morons is staggering. Tim can stand when he's proven that he's not the smartest person in the room. I agree with that, but I don't think this is the best example. Tim's NPC logic settings are stuck on argue. Okay. I'm not a Christian. Thanks, Tim. We figured that out. Tim's arrogance is insane. Okay. If we're talking about arrogance, I think I'm going to levy that towards the rationalist. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Tim actually did pretty well in this. He didn't do perfectly, of course, because he's never read this kind of Geps or esoteric stuff, but he did pretty well. I think Andrew's probably a brighter guy than Tim. I think Tim is kind of a midwit who pretends he's super bright, and unfortunately, someone described him really well. They said, he's smart enough to recognize when he's the smartest person in the room, but he's not smart enough to recognize when he's not smartest person in the room. I think that's pretty good, but Andrew's just giving this basic bitch rationalism, so hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you guys disagree. I prefer if you're cool about it, but you don't have to be. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys soon. I love you guys.